The universe had a cruel sense of humor. Lieutenant Commander Vex'tal of the Xylosian Collective had spent her entire military career believing her species was the pinnacle of evolution, logical, efficient, and above the base emotional impulses that plagued lesser beings. Now, she was pinned beneath a twisted support beam in the wreckage of a human freighter, her carapace cracked, hemolymph seeping onto the cold metal floor, and her life literally in the hands of one of those lesser beings. 20 minutes earlier, her scout ship had been on a routine patrol near the Cygnus sector when a rogue asteroid field had appeared on her sensors too late. The evasive maneuver had failed. Her ship had spiraled into the hull of a massive, lumbering human transport vessel, the Crimson Venture. The impact had torn both ships apart. Consciousness had returned to her in fragments. The acrid smell of burning insulation, the scream of twisting metal, the red pulse of emergency lighting, and the pressure, the terrible, crushing pressure on her lower thorax where the beam had her trapped. She had tried to remain calm. She was Xylosian. Panic was for the soft-skinned races. But as her internal chronometer ticked past the 5-minute mark and her lifeblood continued to drain from her, a cold dread began to creep into her thoughts. Then she heard the footsteps. Heavy, boots on metal, moving with purpose. A figure appeared in the haze of smoke. It was a human male, clad in a torn environment suit with a red cross hastily painted on the shoulder. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his face was smeared with soot and blood that was not his own. He carried a battered medical kit in one hand and a plasma cutter in the other. He stopped when he saw her. For a long, tense second, they stared at each other, the insectoid alien and the human medic. Vex'tal had studied humans. She knew they were capable of kindness, but also of irrational violence. She knew they feared the Xylosian form, with its chitinous plates and multifaceted eyes. She expected him to recoil. She expected him to leave her to die. Instead, he dropped his knees beside her, the plasma cutter clanging against the deck. "Easy," he said, his voice rough but surprisingly gentle. "Easy now. Let me see." His name was Corporal Elias Vance, and he was the only medical officer left on the Crimson Venture. The ship had been carrying refugees and crew to a colony on the edge of settled space. When the Xylosian scout ship had slammed into them, chaos had erupted. He had already lost a dozen patients. He was running on fumes and pure adrenaline. He saw the Xylosian officer and didn't hesitate. To him, she wasn't an enemy. She was a patient. She was bleeding. His gloved hands reached for the beam pinning her down. He grabbed it, grunting with effort, and tried to lift it. It didn't budge. "Okay," he muttered to himself. "Okay, plasma cutter it is." He grabbed the tool and activated it. The brilliant blue-white flame roared to life, and he positioned it near the beam, close to her trapped body. Vex'tal's compound eyes widened. The heat was immense. The flame was inches from her exposed abdomen. Her instincts screamed at her. This was it. This was how they killed their prisoners. Slow. Painful. As the superheated plasma began to slice through the metal, a shower of sparks rained down onto her cracked carapace. The sensation was agonizing. It felt like fire ants crawling into her wounds. Her control shattered. "Hey, not so rough," she shouted, her voice a series of frantic clicks and hisses that were automatically translated by the universal translator chip embedded in both their suits. "You're burning me." Elias immediately pulled the plasma cutter back and killed the flame. He looked at her, then at the sparks still smoldering on her shell. He saw her flinch. "Sorry," he said, and he meant it. "Sorry. I have to cut this, or you're stuck. But I'll be faster. Hold on." Vex'tal was stunned into silence. An apology? A human. apologizing to her? She had been trained to expect deception, cruelty, and barbarism. She had not been trained for this. Part 2. The Unexpected Touch. Elias worked quickly but with a new, almost impossibly delicate precision. He angled the plasma cutter differently, using his free hand to shield her body from the worst of the sparks. Within 30 seconds, the beam was cut. He tossed the heavy metal aside as if it weighed nothing and immediately turned back to her. Okay, let's see what we've got. His hands moved over her injured thorax. They were large hands, scarred and calloused, but they moved with the practiced gentleness of a healer. He touched her carapace, probing the edges of the crack. Vex'tal flinched again, a reflexive response to being touched by a predator. "Shoo," he soothed, not looking up from his work. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're losing fluid. I need to stop the bleed." Vex'tal's mind raced. In Xylosian culture, physical contact was reserved for mates and close kin. To be touched by an alien, a human, was a violation of the deepest kind. Every instinct told her to strike out, to bite, to do something to defend her honor. But she couldn't move. And beneath the shock and the fear, something else was happening. His touch was warm. It was firm but careful. He wasn't probing to cause pain. He was searching for a way to help. He pulled a spray canister from his kit. "This is a biofoam sealant. It's going to feel cold, and it might sting, but it'll hold you together until we can get you to a Real medical bay. Ready?" She didn't know how to respond. She simply stared at him. He took that as a yes. He applied the foam. The cold was shocking, but almost immediately, the seeping pain in her side began to dull. The sealant hardened, forming a temporary synthetic carapace over her wound. "There," he said, sitting back on his heels. "That should hold. Can you move?" Vex'tal tested her limbs. The pain was still there, a deep, throbbing ache, but the immediate danger had passed. She slowly, carefully, pushed herself up onto her forelegs. She towered over the seated human. "Why?" The word escaped her before she could stop it. Elias looked up at her, wiping sweat and soot from his brow. "Why what? Why did you help me? I am Xylosian. Your enemy. Your ship is destroyed because of me." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he gestured to the chaos around them. "Look around, ma'am. Ship's dead. Crew's dying. Doesn't matter what flag you were flying before the crash. Right now, you're just another casualty, and I'm the only medic." He stood up, groaning as his knees popped. "Besides, my mama didn't raise me to let people die just because they look different." He offered her his hand. Vex'tal stared at the outstretched hand. It was such a human gesture. Vulnerable. Trusting. In her culture, offering a hand was a sign of submission, of weakness. But looking at this man, covered in grime, exhausted beyond reason, she saw no weakness. She saw something she had no word for in her language. Something stubborn. Something noble. She slowly extended one of her upper limbs, the delicate, multi-jointed appendage usually reserved for fine manipulation. She wrapped it around his hand. The grip was strange, but it was real. It was connection. He helped her to her full height. She was unstable, leaning against a bulkhead for support. "Okay," Elias said, slinging his medical kit over his shoulder. "We need to move. There's an emergency shelter 2 decks up. I have other patients there. Can you walk?" "I believe so." "Good. Stay close. And if you see any of your buddies, try not to start a fight. I'm too tired for diplomacy." They moved through the wreckage together. The human and the alien. The medic and the soldier. Every step was agony for Vex'tal, but she forced herself to keep moving. She watched the human as he navigated the debris. He stopped twice more on the way, once to check the pulse of a dead crewman, and once to use his cutter to free a human woman trapped in a twisted doorway. He didn't ask Vex'tal for help. He didn't expect anything from her. He simply worked. When they finally reached the emergency shelter, it was a scene of controlled chaos. 24 humans were huddled together, some wounded, some just scared. A few children cried quietly. When they saw Vex'tal enter behind Elias, a wave of fear rippled through the group. A man stood up, his face twisting in anger. "What the hell is that doing here?" he shouted, pointing at Vex'tal. "That thing killed my brother. Its people attacked us." Elias stepped forward, placing himself between the angry man and Vex'tal. "Stand down, Jenkins. That thing doesn't belong here. It's a monster." Vex'tal felt her own anger rising. Monster. The word stung more than she expected. She was about to speak, to defend herself, when Elias spoke first. "She's a patient," Elias said, his voice low and hard. "Just like the rest of you. She's injured. She's scared. And she's under my protection. You got a problem with that, you take it up with me. But right now, we have wounded to tend to. So sit down and shut up." The man, Jenkins, glared at Vex'tal for a long moment, but he eventually sat down, his eyes still burning with hatred. Vex'tal looked at Elias. He had risked the anger of his own people to defend her. An enemy. Why? Part 3. The Healer's Code. The next 12 hours were a blur of pain and exhaustion. The emergency shelter's power flickered constantly. The air grew stale. But Elias worked without stopping. He moved from patient to patient, stitching wounds, administering painkillers, offering quiet words of comfort. He changed the dressing on Vex'tal's wound twice, each time with that same impossible gentleness. At one point, a young human girl, no more than 5 years old, woke up screaming from a nightmare. Her mother was unconscious, injured in the crash. The girl was alone and terrified. Vex'tal watched as Elias tried to calm her, but the girl was too scared, too disoriented. She wouldn't stop screaming. On an impulse she didn't understand, Vex'tal moved closer. She lowered herself to the girl's level, her alien form casting a long shadow in the dim light. The girl saw her and screamed louder. Vex'tal didn't retreat. She remembered something from her studies of humans, a calming ritual. She slowly, carefully, extended one of her antennae. It was a delicate, feathery appendage, and she waved it gently in front of the girl's face, creating a soft, hypnotic pattern. The girl's screams subsided into hiccuping sobs. She stared at the moving antenna, mesmerized. "It's okay," Vex'tal said, her translator softening her clicks into a surprisingly gentle tone. "The scary noise is over. You're safe." The girl reached out a tiny hand and touched the antenna. Vex'tal froze, allowing the touch. The girl giggled. A small, wet, shaky giggle. Elias watched the scene, a tired smile crossing his face. He gave Vex'tal a small nod of approval. Hours later, rescue ships finally arrived. First a Xylosian cruiser, then a human Alliance frigate. They arrived in the shelter at the same time, 2 armed groups facing each other across the cramped space, tension crackling in the air. A Xylosian officer, Vex'tal's superior, stepped forward. "Lieutenant Commander Vex'tal, you are alive. We will take you home." A human officer stepped forward as well. "Corporal Vance, we're extracting the survivors. Let's move." Vex'tal looked at Elias. He was packing his medical kit, preparing to leave with the humans. He looked exhausted, depleted, but whole. She walked towards him, ignoring the gasps from both groups of soldiers. She stopped in front of him. "Human," she said. He looked up. "Yeah. I do not know your name." "Elias." Corporal Elias Vance. Corporal Elias Vance, she repeated, committing the sounds to memory. You saved my life. You protected me. You showed me that my understanding of your species was incomplete. He shrugged, a little embarrassed. Just did my job. No, she said firmly. You did more than your job. You did the unexpected. You were kind when you had every reason to be cruel. I will not forget this. She extended her hand, the same way he had done for her in the wreckage. She offered it to him. He looked at her hand, then at her face. He smiled, that same tired, genuine smile, and took her hand in his. Take care of yourself, Lieutenant Commander, he said. You as well, Corporal. They parted. She walked towards her people. He walked towards his. But something had changed. A bridge had been built, not of politics or treaties, but of simple, unexpected humanity. As Vex'tal boarded the Xylosian cruiser, she looked back one last time at the human ship. She thought about his hands, the hands that had hurt her with sparks, yes, but then had healed her with gentleness. She thought about the word monster, and how easily it had been thrown at her, and how easily she had once thrown it at others. She realized, with a clarity that shocked her, that monsters were not a matter of species. They were a matter of choice. And Corporal Elias Vance, the rough, tired, impossibly gentle human medic, had chosen to be something else entirely. He had chosen to be a healer. And in doing so, he had healed something in her that she didn't even know was broken.